the difference between a chaotic, fragmented, pre-paradigmatic set of understanding versus a coherent, integrated set of understanding is simply qualitatively different. Okay. It's like you look at that Dalmatian picture, you know, I don't know if you know, there's an illusion where it's a bunch of black and white dots. Okay.
Yes.
And you look at that and you're like, what is that? And it's like a bunch of black and white dots. Okay. To me, the current field of psychotherapy is a bunch of black and white dots currently arranged. When you then could extract the Dalmatian out of the bunch of black and white dots, and then if we could get everybody to see the Dalmatian, our capacity to coordinate our language systems and then engender understanding of what the core is and build off of that, rather than, oh, here's another dot I'm going to study, would just be qualitatively different in terms of what it would afford in terms of our advance. So I think that there is that. I can then get into how I do therapy that I feel often is quite different than many, because it seems to afford me at least a way to take theory and reality and fuse them together in a much tighter way in the real. Meaning it's like when I'm with somebody, my theory and the reality of the experience of being feels now much tighter. There's a much tighter grip, and the theory's up to the task. So if somebody's in the midst of, you know, really struggling, okay, then I can listen to their psyche and I can think about the way in which their psyche is in constant conflict between, say, the animal investor and the primate relator and the human justifier. Okay. And then that affords me an opportunity to then use my human capacity to enter their psyche. Okay. Use my empathy and feel myself into their world. And that allows me to be able to take the ideographic aspects, organize them with these general principles, and offer them what often feels to be a much more coherent, broad, empathetic that is true to their unique experience. Okay. So essentially it reveals I often refer to my approach as directive empathy. Okay. So of course we have the humanistic approach, which Rogerian in particular, which is ground. I argue that the core of fundamentally good therapy starts with Rogers. Okay. And the reason is because what Rogers saw is the stack of the self in a particular way, where at the foundational core is the organismic valuing process into essentially an ego, a justifying thing that then has to navigate the social environment. Okay. And he saw that the development of that could be stunted and pulled away because judgmental others create uncertainty, which then create a need to show false self, etc., that alienates oneself from the organismic valuing process. Okay. And then Rogers, of course, then wanted to create an unconditional positive regard relationship that had accurate empathy, that could then basically mirror the underlying organismic valuing process and create the capacity to find the actualization. Okay. Which I totally agree with. What I think Rogers overshot on was the idea that the exterior mirror simply had to be toward the empathy and couldn't also bring an adequate and accurate conceptual system to the ego that could then shine a light on the organismic valuing process and afford its capacity to clarify it. Okay. So directive empathy then emerges, where I can bring my scientific mapping and afford them that conceptual system, train them sort of on it, show through interpretation how, and then they can bring their interpretive ego, as it affords the capacity to internalize this, shine it on their experiential psyche in a particular way, and then utilize that to guide the transformation, to see what the maladaptive processes are with a lot more conceptual specificity, even as you're mirroring and holding and attending. And then what you can get is you can get the affective charges and the signals that are going in an attachment relational context that then affords the narrative to be aware and attuned of what's going on, cultivate a place where you can metabolize that emotion, and then transform it towards adaptive outcomes in the short and long term. And if you do that, I think that's an actual way to really describe both the learning emotional mechanisms, the relational context of relation, and the kinds of principles and processes that are reliably associated with adaptive change.